Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
All right, welcome back to Taming the High Cost of College. This is a podcast about planning and paying for college. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge, and today I'm sitting down with Chuck Erickson. He's a college counselor that I've worked with for many years now, and he kind of does helping with the students, where I do mostly helping with the parents. So a lot of times we work on the same problems, just from different angles. Welcome, Chuck.
Thanks, Brad. Great to see you again. We haven't chatted in a while, and I'm happy to be back on your podcast.
Yes. And we're trying something new here. We're actually going to put it out there on video now as well. So we'll see how that goes. All right. So today I want to talk about, is college worth it? Or is X college worth it? That's going to be more than our other choices. And I think that comes up a lot. And you see it in things like discussion boards, especially, where everybody has their opinion and it could get very heated about, oh, college is never worth it, or, what a scam, or all that kind of stuff, of course. But I have this discussion a lot with parents, and I think you do as well. So where do we begin with that idea? As far as, what are you thinking, or what questions do you come back with when parents ask, is it worth it?
I think it really depends upon what the context of the situation is. So I've been a college counselor for 10 years, and prior to this work, I was associate director of admissions. So I worked literally in an admissions office for 15 years. And I'm really trying to help understand where they're coming from with that question. So is a expensive college really worth it, or is just any college worth it? I think we also have to look at what's going on in the world as far as employment opportunities. There's some careers now that definitely require education, in fact, further education than what they required even 5 or 10 years ago. And there are other professions that used to say you need a bachelor's to be in this career, and that is no longer required. You can be self-trained or do some training online through different courses and modules and certificates, and that might be enough to be able to prepare you. So I always want to find out from parents, what are you saying? Is it worth it? You mean in the 1-year investment, the 5-year investment, the lifetime investment? It's kind of a loaded question.
Absolutely. And I think that's one important point, is there's a lot of people out there that try and calculate, is it worth it? The return on investment. Well, if you spend this much and you have this career and you make this money, then, oh, look, it's worth it, or it's not. Or this college is going to be better than that college because their average starting salary is this instead of that. And my caution is, while that statistical analysis is perhaps useful for public policy or for colleges themselves trying to decide what to do with their programs and that type of thing, I think it's relatively worthless for the typical family, because you're not average. You're not going to get the average salary. You're not going to get the average grades. Nothing's going to be average. You're not going to pay the average price, and your student is going to be above average or below average academically, et cetera, et cetera. So trying to do that analysis, I think, while it's interesting and perhaps valuable for the averages, and again, more useful, I think, if you're trying to plan, what should the state of Wisconsin do about this particular program or this particular benefit? Yeah, then averages are worthwhile. But when you're talking about just this one student or just the 3 kids in our family, I think all that it's a little bit of a waste of time, because anecdotal evidence also pops up. Well, I know this kid that did this and did that, and it turned out fantastic. Well, okay, I know this kid where it went just the opposite way. What's the point?
Right. And I think that's always hard. On social media, especially, we always see the success stories of a student who got admitted to every Ivy school and got a full ride scholarship or whatever, and what have you. But those are few and far between stories. And what's the truth of the matter is, as you said, is that every situation is different. I think I love that you brought up the thought of price and cost. I think part of this question about, is it worth it, is that a lot of families and parents are seeing the actual price tag on the website, and they're not fully understanding what that really means as far as an out-of-pocket cost. That's probably a whole other topic for a whole other day, to help families understand what is the price tag versus what's the actual cost. But especially for families, the ones that I work with that have not gone to college, and now their student wants to go to college, there really is a misunderstanding as to what the price versus the cost of college is. So we could talk about that a whole nother time.
Right, exactly. So what you're alluding to is, while some colleges list between, say, $25,000 a year all the way up to $90,000 a year, what you actually pay could be a steep discount, where a $90,000 college might cost $10,000. And a
Yeah.
$30,000 college might actually cost a little more than that because of surprise. You're in a major that costs more, or they have extra fees, and it's just you know, kind of a challenge out there to really understand the actual numbers.
Absolutely. And that is always a challenge for parent planning. And, then also the rising cost of college you hear as a big buzzword right now. Costs are not stagnant. So the price that you see for the first year may not be the same price in future years. And as you mentioned, the major might impact it, where the student is living, what type of meal plan they picked. This is where colleges are using averages. So the price that you see is an average price, but that may not be exactly what your particular student or family will be paying.
Right. Absolutely. And some of it's in your control and some of it's out of your control. So that's the cost. Well, so if we're going to do a is it worth it analysis, let's talk about the other side. Well, what are the benefits? And now we're trying to compare, well, is this benefit worth X, right? But I think for some families, it really is earning potential that they're focused on.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that a good way to look at it or not so
I think
much? Or
if you're only looking at earning potential, you're really only talking about more like a stock market investment. You're putting money in and you're expecting to get some type of return really straight away or in the future. Where with college, the earning potential is one factor, but it's also the experience, the knowledge, the connection to other students, and leaving your home. We know that students who go off to college are interacting with a wider variety of people, making more connections. Finding a future spouse, I think, could be a potential benefit to going to college. When I look at my friend circle myself, I have some that I've stayed friends with from high school, but a large chunk of my friends and connections are from college, whether that was from my undergraduate experience or my graduate school experience. So I think there are benefits beyond just looking at, okay, will I make money? Yes, that should be a factor. But also, it's really hard to predict, okay, student at 18 is going in at this major, and this is going to be their exact career trajectory 5 years later, not to mention 10 or 20 years later. I mean, you could look at the two of us as perfect examples. Neither of us went to college specifically to do the jobs that we are doing now, for sure.
right.
So our whole world changes, and it's hard for parents to just say, yep, you're going to go in this major, and it's going to be very linear, and we're going to get a really great return on investment.
Right. And I agree with all that. I think there is one caution where you are setting yourself up for a very obvious failure. I think it was one of the California schools, USC, I think it might have been, where they kind of got in trouble because they were pushing people into a master's program in sociology. It was very expensive. And it turns out once you have that master's degree, your starting salary is $30,000 or $40,000, and the math just doesn't work. You borrow that much money, and they were pushing kids to borrow it, just saying, well, go ahead and borrow it, and then you can pay it back. And it turns out they couldn't pay it back because their salaries were so low that they could barely survive on that. So I
I
think
think that's
that's
an
one thing
excellent.
is you want to be at least a little bit conscious that you're not, completely delusional. But from there, anything beyond that, I think there is a little more nuance to it.
Yeah, there is a real factor about being overeducated and underexperienced. And many colleges and universities are offering those accelerated programs where you're able to get both a bachelor's degree and a master's, or even start a PhD or another higher level learning. Why? Because they're businesses. They know that you are already a client, you are a customer, and they are giving you this opportunity to remain a customer for additional time and get that extra tuition dollars. You really need to be sure that getting a higher level degree immediately is going to benefit you, as you said, where it is true in some professions that will actually excel you in your career. But in many
Right.
others, I point out to like MBA programs, a lot of MBA programs want you to actually go out into the workforce and work for a while and then come back and get your MBA, where many colleges are saying, yeah, you can complete your MBA with an additional year. Is that going to be
Right.
beneficial, or is that going to make your job prospects actually worse?
Right. It is a little bit of the college's upselling. It's the college
Yes.
equivalent of, do you want fries with that? As long as you're here in the drive-through, can we sell you a couple more dollars worth of fries? And colleges are, as long as we have you here, can we sell you another year with another degree or another 2 years or whatever it might be? And again, nothing wrong with it, but I think understanding how it really works in the real world is where, got to do that due diligence and understand. And
Yeah.
because what you just mentioned there of will an MBA without any experience matter in the workforce? That would be something I would have to research because I don't know the answer to that for sure. But I'm guessing they would rather see an MBA and experience much more than just a lot of book work.
Even within places like MBAs or Masters of Science, or even my own profession, Master of Education, part of the curricula says, write about your experiences and what you have been learning in your career. Well, if you're a 22-year-old recent graduate, and now you're starting an MBA, you don't have much experience to be able to pull from and talk about, okay, have you written a business plan? Have you gone through several fiscal cycles? Like, how do you reflect on that? In my own master's, I had already worked for almost 2 years before I jumped into my master's, and not that it was a long time, but it was enough experience for me to go, okay, I learned this while I was in the real world, and I was working while I was getting my master's, and that influenced my master's program, and it made it better. But yeah, I'm always worried about overeducated and lack of experience, and I'm worried that that's impacting some of the students who are trying to find jobs.
Right. All right. So the next thing to discuss a little bit around this decision is this a rational decision or an emotional decision? I think for a lot of families, it gets all intertwined and it's hard to parse it out for sure. And I think emotions, where I see the emotions are things like, I loved college. I want my kids to have the same experience. Therefore, I'm willing to pay what it takes for my kids to have the experience. It's not really career related. It's not really earning potential or any of that. It's go to college and have fun like I did. And that's me. I mean, I quite literally, that's part of my reason to be happy to pay for college is I thought it was a great experience. I want my kids to have it. Turns out, luckily, the kind of careers they're interested in kind of require college. So it's a good fit for them as well. I'm not sending them to a 4-year college in an effort to become a welder or something. They are choosing careers that require a 4-year degree. So it's working out. But I see that a lot with families of, I went to this type of college or I had this experience. And if I could reproduce that for my kids, I'm all in.
I also feel like, and I agree with everything you've said, but I also feel like there's this social pressure or this idea of kind of the book of life of, you graduate high school and you just automatically go to college. And I am now seeing anywhere from 5 to 10% of my students taking a pause. They may go through the college search process while they're in high school, but they may say, you know what, I'm going to take a year, maybe even 2 after high school and learn some executive functioning skills or do a low entry job in the field that I'm thinking of, or take care of my own mental and physical health before I dive right into college. Because if they've been stressed, we have a high level of anxiety and depression going on with our teenagers right now. And if they don't take care of that before they go off to college, that can really get to a different level. So I caution parents to think that, the next step after high school is you just have to go into college because that's just kind of the social norm. It's not for a lot of people, and it is okay to take a year or two to regroup, understand oneself, grow up a little bit. There are lots of programs out there. If you don't want them sitting at home on the couch, I totally get that. There are programs out there that cost less than college where the student can be independent and learn some skills. There are even study abroad opportunities where students can, spread their wings and try a new experience. So I want to caution people about the obvious, as you said, the emotional response is, high school, college, and that doesn't have to happen.
Right, exactly. And what we're talking about is commonly referred to as a gap year. And then there's a couple of podcasts in the collection going back a few years where we talk about semester at sea as an option, and then just gap year and a couple gap year experts on the podcast in the past. So there is some information out there, but yes, gap years and all kinds of things that are kind of new and exciting and different. I think that's what's maybe changing is we went from college as not really a luxury, but kind of a small percentage of people went on to get their college degree, and even smaller percentage went on to get anything advanced. And those numbers have climbed and climbed and climbed over the last, say, 40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
And we kind of peaked a couple of years ago where it's like, okay, 63% of high school graduates going to college perhaps was too much. And it's actually started to come back. And again, with the prices going up and do we really need this degree for this career and some rationality? Again, I think the government did a very big disservice when they said college for everyone, because they put that idea in your head that, well, college is the path to success. It's the only path. And therefore we have to make it available for everyone. To be fair, that's not That's far from the truth. Lots of people have other paths that are just as good or better. And more importantly, better for that particular student. I think we got to circle back around to that is what really matters is what's good for this particular student with these facts, these goals, these abilities, whatever it might be, and stop so much about, this is good for everyone or this is bad for everyone.
Yeah, and that's where you and I really complement each other is that you're really focusing on the financial aspect and helping parents understand the financial side, and I'm really student focused. 90% of what I do as a college counselor is working one-on-one with the student to help them figure out what do they want. Having a kid look at the college search process is like letting them run free in the Mall of America and say, all right, you can shop in all the stores that you want, but you really have to pick only one where you spend all of your money. And that's just overwhelming for a teenager. So I help them figure out what is the best fit academically, socially, and then listening to parents and advice from you as far as financial fit as well, because a lot of times those things can be imbalanced. They
Right.
might be in the wrong academic fit, the wrong social fit, and as we're talking about today, the wrong financial fit, and that could be disastrous.
Right. And we've kind of talked about the parents being irrational as far as, and again, not in a bad way, but that's just, that's
No,
life, right? Where you feel guilty that you
yeah,
can't afford to help as much as you want. Or
right.
again, you have your preconceived notions of what you want for your kids. There's the stereotypical, certain ethnicities or whatever, you have a choice. You can be a doctor or you can be a lawyer. Those are your choices, right? All that baggage, so to speak. And it kind of applies to the parents. But there's also another irrational actor in all of this, and that would be the student, where, again, in my opinion, most students, I always use this analogy, right? Take a typical middle income, upper middle income family, and the student at 12 or so says, well, everybody else has a phone. I should get a phone. And it's so unfair. And next birthday, Christmas, whatever, a phone shows up and they have a phone. And then they get to be 16, 17. And there's like, Dad, you have to drag me back and forth to my sports and my this and my that. And, if we had another car, life would be so much better for you. And Dad's like, yeah, that would be good for me. Next thing you know, a car shows up. All right. Now they're going to do college shopping. And especially if you're at a little more prestigious high school or a private school or whatever it is, everybody else is looking at the expensive schools. So they are going to look at the expensive schools because everybody else is saying USC or NYU or all the name brands. And it's just normal. They have no concept of, well, dad's just going to shake the money tree or mom's going to shake the money tree and somehow pay for it. If it's $9,000 for a car or $90,000 for an education, it's just a big number. They don't really comprehend it that well. And I don't know what the solution to that is, but I certainly see the problem in my own kids as well as all over the place.
Well, yeah, and I love all those points. I think that's really especially important for parents to hear is that you don't have to do what the other parents are doing, but there is a lot of pressure about this. I have parents that say, I went to a very hyper selective school when I went to college, and so I want my kid to do the same. And I'm just going, well, your kid might not be the fit for that. Or they're saying, our neighbors are all going to tour XYZ very selective college. We need to go tour that as well. And some of this I have to remind parents is who is going to be going to that college? Parents
Right.
get to wear, proud dad of whatever, university sweatshirt, but the kid is actually going. So I know you want to put the bumper sticker on the back of your car and for people to go, ooh, but that shouldn't be your sole way of choosing what school you should attend at. Same thing, students are getting the social media pressure. We talk in my community, in the college counseling community, about the TikTok influence. And there are colleges that no one had ever heard of 3, 4, 5 years ago that are now surging in applications because students are all swarming to those particular places. We're seeing a huge push towards the SECs and a lot of the large Southern colleges, which used to have acceptance rates very high up there that are now becoming hyper selective and very challenging to get into, even for in-state students in the South. So this
Wow.
has all become social media pressure. So it's just like,
Right.
okay, the state of Florida, University of Florida and Florida State have both become very selective, even if you are from Florida, because so many students are looking to go to those institutions from out of state and in state, thanks to things like TikTok, Instagram, and other social media influencers. So a lot
Right.
of
So
changes
you
happening.
think that's the colleges doing a good job of marketing themselves? And I mean, that's where colleges want to be, right? They want to have so many applicants that they can be selective and then they can raise their prices and again, fill their classes, and life's much better
Yes.
when you get to say, well, we'll just take the best students. We'll take the students that are willing to pay. Well, everybody wants to be the Harvard and Yale, where
Right.
they have a lot of leverage and some colleges over the years have kind of evolved to be like that. So now with TikTok, do you think it's students driving it, or is it the colleges with some brilliant marketing, or both?
Well, I'll tell you that Harvard still markets a lot. Every
Yes.
year, they send out tens of thousands of postcards to kids who have achieved high scoring on the ACT or the SAT saying, hey, have you heard of Harvard? You should come check us out. And I get students all the time that will message me saying, hey, Harvard's recruiting me. I got a postcard. I'm like, no, that's marketing material. Calm down. They're not
Right.
specifically going after you. As far as TikTok and social media, it's not as much the college's social media. It's again peers. So it's students from their high school who went to that college who are a year or two older. They were social media friends. They're now seeing what's going on at the college. So the college's social media accounts are not exploding with popularity. It's students who are there. Fun fact, the last time we had the Summer Olympics, many of those Olympians are going to college, and students were falling in love with them on the Olympics and then following them on social media and going, oh, they go to that college. And then we saw a surge in application to that college because of the social media influence. Other thing, like Villanova's applications are way up. Why? Because Pope Leo went to Villanova. We're seeing the Pope effect. So
Yep.
he's become popular with Catholics. And so all of a sudden, a lot of students are applying to Villanova. I will tell you, 10 years ago, Villanova was not difficult to get admitted to. And here we are 10 years later, and we've got a college that has become very selective.
Right. Absolutely. So obviously we've talked a little bit about the problems and some of what we see. What are the solutions? So let's assume that we're there, right? We're a parent of a high school junior, high school senior, and we're in the throes of all of this. What do we do to make, because, mom or dad or student or everybody's is thinking, is it worth it? So now, and you say, well, I can't go by the statistics. Well, what do I go by? What do I do to figure out, is it worth it, or is it worth it for us? Or how do I think that through?
That's really challenging because you've got to first listen to figure out what your student is possibly interested in doing in the future and helping them. This generation has not done a ton of career exploration. They only really know what they see in front of them. So there are some great resources online and through your high school to help students do some reflection as to what they might potentially go into. Keep in mind, though, over 70% of students change their major within their first year of college. So you might want to go broad with that. I think another thing is that parents need to first talk about the financial picture, because I have too many parents that are way excited about getting the college search started, but they really need to understand their finances, because they're coming to me saying, hey, we need to do the college search. And one of my first questions is, great, what's your budget? And they typically look at me like a deer in the headlights going, what do you mean, what's a budget? And as we talked about at the beginning of the show, there's a wide range in what colleges can cost. And so if parents aren't understanding their own financial situation, it's hard for us to get started. I can help a student figure out, okay, who are you? What type of educational experience do you want? Big, small, urban, rural, sporty, outdoorsy, geeky, artsy, more technology based. But parents have to help me with that and figure out, okay, and how much are we looking to spend as far as this picture?
Right.
2,700 college options. So there's lots of places to pick from.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I do with families, right? I'm primarily, you mentioned that you work 90% with students. Well, I work 90% with parents, working through with the college budget and how do we do this efficiently and all that kind of stuff. And I'm offering a course now as well that will help families, figure out what their college budget should be, but more importantly, what a realistic college budget should be, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you've heard things like, well, yeah, we want to send our kid to college and we've got $5,000 a year that we can pay. It's like, okay, well, that's not even going to cover the community college. We got to get more realistic, right? Your budget needs to grow or your goals need to change or whatever it might be. I think for a lot of families, the typical college budget is 20, 25,000 a year and up. Certainly you can spend more, but even like kind of minimums, the low cost options. And again, are there exceptions? Absolutely. I mean, if you're very low income, if your student is able to score a lot of scholarships, but now you got to learn the whole process and the whole game of need-based aid and merit aid and all that stuff. And that's what the course is about is, if you're going to go into it cold, assume you're going to spend 25,000 or more. If you happen to be the family that can spend less because of, again, need kinds of, athletics, all kinds of ways that you might spend less. You got to understand why you're going to spend less before you actually will spend less. And there's a lot of rumors out there. I have parents tell me, oh, we don't have to pay
Yes.
a lot of money because of X. And it's like, well, no, I think you're wrong, because that's not a strategy I've ever heard of. It turns out it's not true.
It's a strategy that's out there. I think it's like a unicorn. It doesn't really exist, but there's this thought that it's a strategy. And I'll be a plug for my own podcast, Don't Chuck It Up. So on my Don't Chuck It Up podcast, I talk through a lot of these things as to how to find fits for students academically, athletically, music wise, going to college out of state, thinking of going to college in the UK as an option. And I bring on guests from my world in the college counseling area to talk about how can we help students find that right fit and help them understand what will work best for them in the long run and in the short run. And sometimes, as we said at one point in the show, the answer might not be going to college. It might be something else, like a gap year.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And there's a lot to learn potentially, right? And again, some families, it's pretty straightforward and they've got the cookie cutter experience. That is not as common as you'd think. Most people have other reasons to learn more, whether it's, again, the student that wants to be far and wide, a family with multiple children, divorced and blended families, business owners, rental property.
Yes.
There's a long list of, I got to do all the normal college stuff. Plus, I got to learn how business owners pay for college. Plus, I got to learn how an athlete goes to college. Plus, I got to learn, special diets or special needs or disability. Again, there's a long list of variation and that kind of stuff. So I guess get educated, right? I have a podcast. You have a podcast. Spend some time listening to podcasts if that's your thing, and watch YouTube if that's the way you're connecting with us now. But learn and go a little deeper than what are the 5 hacks to pay for college? Well, yeah, the 5 hacks are going to be A, B, C. They're going to be the same 5 hacks everywhere. And while they're true, they're also pretty trite, and it's not going to get you where you need to go. You're going to have to go deeper than that and really understand the process.
Absolutely. And that's why I've been putting out my podcast now for a while. I have over 70 episodes available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other platforms. I've got the YouTube channel as well. So all of my interviews with special guests and experts are there. And then you can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, and all the other social medias that are out there. So do get this information. And Brad and I are both trying to put this information out there because we are both frustrated at seeing parents who are not understanding this, and they're going into this and making really poor decisions that could have been solved fairly easily by just getting some basic advice from Brad or myself. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of these families that have very particular cases, and those are the ones that typically hire one or both of us. Is that, okay, we are in a particular scenario, we need help, we have a special situation, whether it's financially speaking or what the student is looking for or their particular background or identity. That's what our jobs are as experts, is to help them navigate it. I equate my job as to like a real estate agent. You can buy a house without a real estate agent, but there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of stuff you need to do. I am kind of like your realtor, but for colleges. I can help you figure out and find the places and navigate all of the paperwork. And I also do some basic information on financial aid and scholarships that Brad also dives into at a much deeper level.
Right, exactly. And yeah, I mean, we complement each other for sure, where I generally don't work a lot with students. And when I'm in over my head, which happens very quickly, it's like, oh, you need to talk to Chuck, because, I don't know anything about an essay. I can't add any value there. I was never good at it. I have an engineering degree. I'm a math person, et cetera, right? So yes, absolutely. So I think certainly if you're in the thick of it, it's just going to be a learning curve, and and if you're not in the thick of it yet, right? If you happen to have a sophomore, freshman, or even grade school kids or middle school, there's things you can do now, even though, again, you're probably not visiting a college with an 8th grader, but certainly parents.
I might argue with that with you. I might say, yes, you should.
You should perhaps, but most people aren't.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Occasionally the 8th grader tags along when you're visiting with your junior and they happen to be part of the family. And I've done that a little bit with my own family. What happens is the 8th grader tends to not pay attention because they don't think it's not for them. They don't think, and they play with their phone. And when it's their turn, they're going to have to go back, most likely. But
they'll have to go back. But I think tagging along, I think the 8th grader is paying more attention to what is going on than what some parents may assume. One of my most recent podcast episodes is actually talking about how to start the college search in 8th or 9th grade, because what's happened in the United States, and partially because of COVID recently, is a lot of this has gotten pushed later. And so students aren't starting until late junior year or early senior year. And in my professional opinion, that is almost starting too late, because there is all of this knowledge that you need to acquire and all of this information you need to collect that we should be starting earlier. So that could be even sending your kid to a summer camp at a college campus, so they start seeing what a college campus looks like for a week over the summer. That's kind of like dipping your toe in the water a little bit. Get the experience, but it's not a huge commitment because you're just there for a week in the summer.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but right. So there's things you would do. Again, you're not taking the formal tour that's targeted to juniors, but there's other things that the student might do. But then there's definitely things that parents can do. Parents can figure out their budget. Parents can figure out if they're going to qualify for need-based aid and merit aid. Parents can do, are we saving enough? Should we save more? Parents can have the discussions of philosophies. Are we paying for it all? Are we paying for some? Are we willing to? 15 years ago, when I first started getting involved in college planning, I had many parents say, they can pick out any college they want. Just whatever's that's great. We'll figure it out. Parents don't say that anymore. They've caught on a little bit and realized that leaving it that open-ended could really cost you. So now it's what I encourage parents to say is something like, well, any college at a reasonable price. And then big asterisk, well, what does reasonable mean? Well, I don't know.
Exactly.
That's what you got to figure out. But you got to put that caveat in there. You tell your student they can go wherever they want until the bitter end, and you're setting yourself up for some interesting challenges. And it happens every year. You deal with it. I deal with it. Surprise, that number is bigger than we thought. What can we do? We don't want that to happen either. So that's why starting early, understanding your options is important. All right, let's wrap things up here. Why don't you tell us a little bit more? What's the name of your podcast and how can we find you again?
Sure. So I'm Chuck Erickson. I'm an independent educational consultant and podcast host. My podcast and YouTube channel are both called Don't Chuck It Up. So you can search on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube for Don't Chuck It Up, or find me on any of your favorite social media. I'm talking about helping students and parents navigate the college search and the application process like a boss.
Absolutely. All right. Well, great. And I'm always at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. We'll have show notes and other information. And we also have the YouTube channel, et cetera, under the same name. So, all right, that's all we have for today. We will see you next week. Thanks, Chuck.
Thanks, Brad, for having me. Always great to chat with you.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.